Intercepts of absolute value functions. So the first thing to remember is that at the x-intercept, y equals 0. So to find the x-intercept, we're going to plug in y equals 0 and solve for x. Then at the y-intercept, x equals 0. So we're going to plug in x equals 0 and solve for y. So here's our first equation. Y equals -3 absolute value of 2x plus 1 plus 5. So I'm first going to find my y-intercept, which means I'm going to plug in x equals 0. So I have y equals -3 absolute value of 2 times 0 plus 1 plus 5. So if you look on the right-hand side, it's just numbers. There's no more variable, which means we're just going to evaluate it. So first I'm going to figure out the answer inside my absolute values. 2 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. And the absolute value of 1 is 1. So I have -3 times 1 plus 5, which means that y equals -3 plus 5, which is 2. So this crosses the y-axis at 0, 2. So now I'm going to find the x-intercept, which means I'm going to plug x equals 0 into my equation. Y equals 0. So I have 0 equals -3 absolute value of 2x plus 1 plus 5. So for this problem, this is a solving an absolute value problem. I only have an x, I have an absolute values. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my absolute values by themselves. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. -5 equals -3 absolute value of 2x plus 1. And still my absolute values are not by themselves. So to finish this, I need to divide both sides by -3. And I get 5/3, positive 5/3, also known as 1 2/3, equals 2x plus 1, absolute valued. Now at this stage, if I want to solve for my absolute value, this is where, remember, we break it up into two equations. So 2x plus 1, and it equals either the positive 1 2/3 or the negative 1 2/3. So if I were to solve the first side on the left hand, I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. I'm going to get 2x equals, and 1 2/3 minus 1 is just 2/3. I'm going to multiply both sides by a half, because that's the same as dividing it by 2, and half of 2 is 1. And I get 2/6, which is the same as 1/3. So that's our first intercept. It's at 1/3, 0. For our other one, I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides and get 2x equals -2 2/3. And then I'm going to multiply both sides by 1/2, which is the same as dividing it by 2. And x equals, and I need to do a little bit of work here. So if you remember, you can either plug it into your calculator if you can figure that out, or I'm going to make -2 2/3 into an improper fraction. So I'm going to be putting, so that 2 times 3 is 6 plus 2 is 8. So we have -8/3 times 1/2. And if I cross reduce, the 2 and the 8 become a 1 and a 4. So I have -4/3, which is the same as -1 1/3. So my other x-coordinate is at -1 1/3, 0. So I've now figured out my y-intercepts and my x-intercepts. Let's try one more. Here's my equation. Y equals 2, absolute value of x minus 3 plus 4. So if I want to find my y-intercept, I'm going to plug in x equals 0. So y equals 2, absolute value of 0 minus 3 plus 4. So the absolute value of 0 minus 3, so that's 0 minus 3 is -3. Absolute valued is 3. So we have 2 times 3 plus 4. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 4 is 10. So y equals 10, which means my y-intercept is at 0, 10. And if I find my x-intercept, I'm going to make y equals 0. So I have 0 equals 2 times the absolute value of x minus 3 plus 4. Again, this becomes a solving absolute values. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides, and I get -4 equals 2 times the absolute value of x minus 3. And if I divide both sides by 2, I get negative 2 equals the absolute value of x minus 3. And if I have an absolute value, it can't equal negative 2, which means there's no answer for this, which means it does not cross the x-axis. So you will come across an absolute value or two, possibly, that might not cross the x-axis. So for this particular equation, there's only a y-intercept.